On this week's edition of Connecticut Naturalist, we take a trip to our nation's capital, where the 17-year periodical cicadas are emerging by the millions. Cowbirds make the best of the all-you-can-eat cicada buffet. We explore the Washington Monument. A mallard duck family has moved into the reflecting pool. We walk over the Potomac River and visit Arlington National Cemetery. Down in the Potomac River, a large catfish swims in the murky water. We take a quick look at the White House. Squirrels look on as I carry my camera through the city. All this and more on this week's edition of Connecticut Naturalist. And now, here's your host. Hello, friends. I'm Will Michael, and you're watching the Connecticut Naturalist. We have a special episode lined up for this week. I was down in Washington, D.C., filming the 17-year periodical cicada emergence. Every 17 years, millions of cicadas emerge from underground. It won't happen again until the year 2021. I'll be reading the paper against my favorite tree while you enjoy this week's program. We just spent the night in our hotel. You can hear all the noises in the background, airplanes flying overhead. It's the weekend of the dedication of the World War II memorial. But we're here looking for cicadas, so let's begin our day. We discover our first cicada right outside our hotel door. It's resting on the rocks in the courtyard. The area surrounding our hotel is covered with pavement and parking lots. But even here, the cicadas have infiltrated. Notice the brightly colored red eyes. This characteristic makes the 17-year periodical cicada easy to identify. They have a black body about 1.5 inches long. The wings are transparent with yellow veins. These wings must beat rapidly to lift this stocky insect off the ground in flight. When in flight, cicadas are somewhat clumsy. Here you can see the size of this insect in relation to the human hand. Now let's head out to a more wooded area and see what we can find. We're now in a recreational park in Kensington, Virginia. Cicadas are everywhere. On sides of trees, they can be seen crawling up to the higher branches to find a good place to produce their buzzing sound, with hopes of attracting a mate. The constant hum you hear in the background is the sound of millions of cicadas buzzing in unison. When I first left the hotel, I heard the sound in the distance. As we approached the park, the volume increased. From a distance, the first time I heard the hum, I thought it was somebody mowing a lawn or somebody with an oversized air conditioner. All this activity begins from a hole in the ground. Cicada nymphs emerge and undergo metamorphosis. The adults live for about 4 to 6 weeks above the earth. For 17 years, the nymphs have been underground. Before emerging, the nymphs spend their lives tunneling underground. They have a pair of strong front appendages excellent for digging. They feed on juices from tree roots. They have a small, beak-like structure that is used to extract fluid from the roots. They don't kill the tree, but just take enough to survive. It's an amazing balance. There's millions of nymphs underground feeding off the trees, but they don't damage the food source. Periodical cicadas synchronize their emergence every 17 years. There are many species of cicadas, each surfacing at different intervals. In Connecticut, we have annual cicadas. They're on a 4 or 5 year cycle, but different brood generations hatch every year. These periodical cicadas can be seen in Washington in smaller numbers each summer, but every 17 years a superbrood known as Generation X by entomologists emerges. Scientists say that 1 acre of land can house 1.5 million cicadas. Now those are some impressive numbers. Temperature and weather conditions are the key factors that bring the nymphs above the earth. Hot spring weather may cause most nymphs to hatch in a window of 1 or 2 nights. During rainy, cold springs, the hatch drags on over a few-week period. The best time to see the metamorphosis from nymph to adult is at night. The cicadas are vulnerable during their transformation. Night emergence helps protect them from birds and other predators. The new adult spends the night next to the larval shell. Then in the morning, it flies away for the first time into the trees and begins searching for a mate. Only the male cicadas sing. The shrill call is produced by a special membrane called a tymbal. When a male catches a female's attention, she will flick her wings as he finishes his song. A courtship dance then follows. Breeding occurs shortly after. After mating, the male usually dies. The female then flies up into the tips of the tree branches. She deposits 400 to 600 eggs in a nest inside young twigs. The birds are seizing the opportunity to feast on the cicadas. A cowbird eats a cicada on the curb of a parking lot. A catbird in a nearby tree hunts for a tasty cicada for himself. That's a lot of protein. In the parking lot of the park, the cicadas have taken over. One crawls alongside this car tire. Another cowbird eats. Just look at how many cicadas are on this one tree alone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Well, you get the idea. After laying her eggs, the female also dies. The eggs hatch about 6 to 8 weeks later. The nymphs fall down to the ground and the cycle is repeated again. This stage is almost impossible to witness. The nymphs are so small, they're hard to see. They then burrow underground for another 17 years, completing this fascinating cycle. The massive amount of cicada numbers is a strategy to overcome predation. An event like this shows us that nature still has the upper hand over humans. Insects are the most successful family of animals on Earth. They live just about everywhere, and their population sizes are enormous. Empty juvenile shells cover the plants surrounding the area. I've never seen so many cases in my life. This tree is loaded with cicadas. There's more in here than I've seen in all the other places combined. It's incredible. As I'm filming, cicadas are landing on my hat, my back, and on my vest. They don't care what's going on around them. They have one goal in mind: continue the species at any cost. There's groups of cicadas all up in the branches. The empty larval shells are all over the leaves. Here's one right here. All along the ground surface, holes can be seen where the nymphs emerged. Up in the trees, more shells cover the leaves. As we scan the ground, we see shells and dead adults carpeting the soil. In certain areas where there's an excessive amount of dead adults, an odor is given off by the decomposing bodies. Now, off on the side here in the grass, or even in the trees, the birds are making a good meal out of these cicadas. Another cowbird eats a juicy cicada. Cowbirds are infamous in the bird world because they lay eggs in other birds' nests. The young cowbird hatches first and pushes the other eggs out of the nest. The other species of bird parents don't know that the fledgling is foreign and raise it as if it were their own. Cowbird parents don't raise their own chicks. They simply lay their eggs and let the other species take care of them. This can cause problems for birds who have low populations. Dead cicada bodies cover the sidewalk. Here, a female cowbird eats while the male stands guard. The female is lighter brown than the male. There's so many cicadas out here flying around, sometimes they even land on your head or your body. One's landed on my hat, the CTnaturalist. Oh, there he goes. The cicadas are everywhere. They land on me, they land on Andrew George, my road partner. The wind is strong today, making it more difficult for the cicadas to fly. They're already poor flyers as it is. They frequently crash down into the grass. Before coming to Washington, I read that millions of cicadas are emerging. I thought millions? No way. Hundreds of thousands sounds more realistic. After witnessing the event firsthand, I now know millions is no exaggeration. After hatching out of the larval shell, adults fly into the trees and feed on sap from twigs. The males sing with hopes of attracting a female. Now we're leaving the park and heading back to our hotel. Arachnologist Andrew George and I Returning to the hotel, Andrew is covered with cicadas. They're flying around the area. Sometimes they land on you. But they're a lot of fun because they're so friendly. There's some on his hand. One landed on his shoulder. So maybe they'll start singing and other cicadas will come. Even at night, cicadas can be seen. Outside our hotel room, we find a cicada crawling around the parking lot. I'll make sure to move him to a location where he won't be crushed by an automobile. Many cicadas perish from being run over or from flying into car windshields. Andrew, George, and I covered a lot of cicada activity on day 1 on the border of Virginia and Maryland. Now for day 2, we head into the heart of Washington, D.C. Here's a look at what we saw. After a good night's rest, Andrew and I head into the center of Washington, D.C. Our first stop is the Lincoln Memorial. Inside the Lincoln Memorial, Andrew has found a cicada. He's more excited about the cicada than the Lincoln Memorial. What would Abe Lincoln say about the cicadas? Just think, this cycle has been happening every 17 years for thousands and thousands of years. Abe Lincoln probably witnessed this event when he was campaigning in Virginia. For those of you who don't know, the artist that sculpted the statue of Lincoln had a son that was deaf. Lincoln's hands are using sign language to spell the letters A-L. Outside the monument, a starling hunts for cicadas in the grass. Here we have a grackle, making sure that starling doesn't get all the food. Even in the center of the capital, nature finds small habitats for creatures to live. A family of ducks swim in the reflecting pool in front of the Washington Monument. These are the presidential mallard ducks. Here's a look at the new World War II monument that opened on Memorial Day weekend. The Thomas Jefferson Monument is a special site. There are a lot of monuments throughout D.C. to remember our country's heroes, but I think they've forgotten one important monument. It's time to petition for a giant cicada monument in recognition for the extraordinary life cycle. Our last stop is the White House. Up on the roof, you'll see guards, making sure the cicadas aren't plotting anything against the president. Squirrels are busy eating seeds. If we had more time, I'm sure we could find a variety of wildlife, even here in the heart of the capital. This is somewhat comical. A sparrow is eating a cicada near the road curb. The squirrel that we just saw is curious as to what the sparrow is eating. It chases the bird away, takes a taste of the cicada, doesn't like it, and discards it. The sparrow then returns to finish off the meal. We say goodbye to the Capitol and head across the Potomac River. Beautiful statues mark the bridge's entrance. A cicada rests on the bridge as tourists walk by. Down in the water of the Potomac, we spot a large fish. From here, it looks like a giant catfish, but it's hard to tell. We're on our way to Arlington National Cemetery. At the entrance of Arlington, a large memorial commemorates the women who have served in our armed forces. We're here at Arlington National Cemetery, and there's cicadas everywhere. They're all over the state of Maryland and in Washington, D.C. As you can see, they're on the hat, Connecticut Naturalist. The cicada wants to take the place of the toad as the decal. There was something peaceful or melancholy to see the cicadas flying and crawling around the gravestones. The cicada's emergence is an example of the overwhelming power of life. Among our lost countrymen, the cicadas emerge. The beauty of life is loved by all species of organisms on Earth, man and insect alike. Here is the eternal flame that burns over the grave of John F. Kennedy. The flame is fed by natural gas from underground Arlington. Off in the distance, we see the Washington Monument, where we spent the earlier portion of the day. A giant pine tree grows on the top of Arlington. I've never seen a pine tree like this before. The branches and trunk are enormous, and the formation of the branches are uniquely curved. On top of General Kearny's grave, a mockingbird sings over the noise of airplanes and cars. Here is a fantastic look at some cicada shells. Have you ever seen so many shells in such close proximity before? This tree must have thousands of shells in its branches. This cicada is just metamorphosizing now. The activity will last for a couple more weeks. In this fountain, we see dead cicadas floating in the water. The cicadas have taken over Maryland and Virginia. We are now walking up to the tomb of the unknown soldier, the last stop on our trip. Here we see the ceremonial changing of the guard. With that, we conclude our trip to Washington, D.C. It's time to head back to the forests of Connecticut. Good news, friends. We made the newspaper. From salamanders to cicadas, Connecticut Naturalist TV is there. I finished reading the entire newspaper, and we've also come to the end of this week's episode. I'm Will Michael, and you've been watching the Connecticut Naturalist. Remember, the 17-year periodical cicadas won't be around again until the year 2021. We have different broods of cicadas that are hatching every year, but the brood of millions and millions is a rare exception. Thanks again, and now stay tuned for another animal music video, and I'll see you next week.
Oh Fiona, how I love thee, cutest frog I've ever seen. I would sing a million songs each night just to have you near. If I had money, I'd buy a diamond ring. The only gift I have is a water lily flower. Each night I fantasize a picnic would be nice, eating dams of flies in a swampy cove with you. Oh Fiona, how I love thee, cutest frog I've ever seen. I would leap through lychee methane mud just to be with you. The crickets creak soft, the full moonlight is pale, the smell of honeysuckle fills the warm night air. Let's take the boat out, we'll hide in the cattails. Tell me the secrets that you would not tell the toad. Perfect yellow smile and tender webby toes, greenest skin I've ever seen, it's olive when she's tan. Ever there's a drought, the pond is drying out, I would give my mud supply to her. Oh Fiona, how I love thee, cutest frog I've ever seen. I would sing a million songs each night just to have you near. Oh Fiona, how I love thee, cutest frog I've ever seen.